It is true, you're a pal and a confidant. Thank you for being a friend. Such awesome words for lyrics to an awesome opening.
And it's Thursday. You know what that means? It's time for us to have another Throwback Thursday. And we're gonna go back in time, throw up that celebration, because Heart of the Stories we tell, and me, Rob, the host, is going to take us back to a quick nostalgic look and see how a story was that might be a little bit on the older side. So celebrate your week almost being over as we look at
The Golden Girls. I can't believe I haven't done this already. Classic TV sitcom. In fact, four of these women, all four of them, are landmark comedians. And yes, in every way, shape, or form, this show was hysterical and still holds up. It even had a kind of weird spin off that I still kind of fondly recall being on CBS after it ended. But for now, what I do here is I take apart stories, I examine what makes them good and bad, I do reviews as stories come up like movies, and these Throwback Thursdays to talk about older ones. If that sounds interesting, click subscribe. But for now, I don't know. Do you put up a spoiler alert for something like this? I mean, it's a timeless comedy, so I mean, there's no facts that are surprises, really. It's your basic comedy. It's a sitcom where these older women live together and the experiences they have. Each individual episode is self contained. There are a handful of subplots that run through each episode and through the seasons. We'll talk about them. But let's start with the setting. The setting is Miami, Florida, and specifically this house, which is owned by one of them, Blanche. The first episode has her looking for a roommate to help offset some bills, plus just cut into the loneliness of living alone. The setting is also very much the late 80s, early 90s. The entire concept really has several bits that you just don't see anymore, and is a little dated, but the jokes are pretty timeless, so Miami's close enough. Let's talk about the important one, the characters. Like I said up top, each of the four main characters are astonishingly awesome comedians, each one with a career in their own right. We start with Blanche. Most of the going jokes about her is the fact that she is extremely promiscuous. Her husband has died, her kids have moved away, she has good amount of money, she was always a person that came from money. Or at least that's what it seemed, that's what she portrays. And again, she's very easy, and that's where most of the jokes go. But don't let it fool you, she's no slouch. She's not stupid. Now, the first of her roommates is Dorothy. Dorothy's a divorcee whose children have all moved away and who's in charge of a school. She teaches, I think she's actually a substitute for most of the series, although I think she has her own classroom eventually. She's the smarter, more independent woman, but she also is looking for some place that she can just kind of relax and be part of something. And then there's the other roommate, Rose. Rose is the second widow, and she's one of those ditzy airhead blondes, a farmer's daughter, who always has one of those things that she can say that's a down-home country sort of answer. Of course, she is truly a ditz. She's not as smart as Blanche at all, let alone Dorothy, but she's also not as easy. And as such, we end up with the three of them. However, then comes Dorothy's mother. Estelle Getty plays my personal favorite character, Sophia. Sophia suffered from a stroke a few years ago, and that part of her brain that says, you shouldn't say that, just turned off. And as such, she's one of those people that just blurts things out. And she is hysterical, because she's normally right, even though she's a little mean-spirited from time to time. She's Dorothy's mother, and she was put in a home, and that's part of the 80s, because the home burnt down, and with it, she has no place to go. So she comes to move in with her daughter, Dorothy. Luckily, Blanche and Rose accept her as part of the family, and she becomes the surrogate mother, although a bit bitchy and mean and even cruel sometimes. She's always good for a laugh, and definitely what makes the show. Now, there are other characters that come in. Stan we're going to talk about specifically, though. Stan is the closest we have to a male lead. He's a reoccurring character, he's Dorothy's ex-husband, and oh boy does Sophia hate him. He's a bit of a con man, and he's one of those people that you just know is just slimy, but more often than not, his heart's pretty much in the right place from episode to episode. But now that we're talking about episodes, let's talk about the plot. The plot is linear, and it's pretty simple. It's all about these older women who have lost the main man in their lives, and who is trying to survive in a world that in the 80s wasn't always accepting of both the elderly and women specifically. They all are coming into their own form of power. They've all lived through the feminism movement and have all found their own place in it. And now, in their golden years, are trying to find a new life, a new push, something to continue on with, and a reason to continue on. And they find it in their friendships with each other. Point of view is simple. We spent most of the time in the home itself, being the one open setting. However, that means that we're following the women. I would say specifically, especially since they're the only ones that really get flashbacks, we're mostly following Dorothy and Sophia. But maybe I'm being partial, because like I said, Sophia is my favorite. Themes and symbolism is simple. Even as a kid, I recognized exactly what this show was thematically about. Friendship, the bonds and the family that we choose to make instead of the ones we're born with, and the way we all come together when we need something new. And that is a great and powerful theme. But every once in a while, they would sneak other ones in there. Specifically, when they're dealing with Blanche, and in order to get away with the censors, they had to kinda snark around the fact that she was a slut. In fact, they very rarely used the word. And the fact that how they would go about this led to some pretty interesting family-friendly comedy that went over my head as a kid, but I still totally enjoy. Sitting around this table is very reminiscent of sitting around any family table. But look at this family. It's not mom, dad, and kids. It's mom and three daughters. It's very specifically three women finding their way in the world today. But let's cut to brass tacks, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, I could say it 100 times. The dialogue, the writing, especially when it's Sophia, but it could be any of the characters, really. Because they all had these great one-liners that would just roll off their tongue. And it was a perfect setup, time and time again. Now, Sophia, being that she was one of those cranky old women that would just tell it like it is, very awesomely would end up with lines that I don't think anyone else could have gotten away with on a TV show back in the 80s. But she's not the only one. Everyone had their little moments, from Dorothy to Blanche and Rose especially, but every once in a while even guest stars and the male leads that were the different boyfriends over the years. And every one of them could tell a story, from a St. Olaf story, from Rose to a Sophia telling about, picture it, Sicily, to Dorothy and Stan talking about their marriage. The dialogue was just awesome. But what about the bad? It's hard for me to pick out a particular bad, except for the fact that some of the episodes were a little too redundant. Every once in a while, the formula would show. And from that, you have the same problem every long-running sitcom has. It just, sometimes the jokes don't land. But the ugly. The ugly is something I want to talk about. In order to keep the story going for its spin-off, but still let the actors and actresses move on that wanted to, they needed to end part of the story. And so the part they end is the house. And specifically, Dorothy and Stan get back together in the end. I guess spoiler alert for the end. Except for the fact that Stan's really, yeah, his heart's in the right place a lot of the times. He's really a douche. And honestly, as someone who comes from a family of a divorce, I can honestly say these two people shouldn't be together. Stan should not be getting back with Dorothy. And Dorothy shouldn't be putting up with the way he does things. It really comes in as a very weird ending to a story that otherwise is very liberating and empowering for the women involved. That the strongest of the individuals, Dorothy, the most educated of the women, Dorothy, just ends up running back to her ex. Overall, I want to rate this, and there's part of me that almost gave it the full-on mithril. But to be honest, it's still just a sitcom. Its story value is relatively limited. It's fun and entertaining, and I definitely recommend everyone go catch an episode or two. They rerun all the time. So I'm giving this a gold. And to be honest, I think that it's one of the few sitcoms that's going to last. It's going to be the I Love Lucy of our generation. An enduring story that takes place very quintessentially in our hearts and our minds. A comedy that can still touch on soft subjects that we're kind of not expecting to hear from people. And a story about liberation and about moving on into the next phase of your life. And of course, a thank you for being a friend. Your heart is true, you're a pal and a confidant. And of course, to all four of these lovely ladies, only one of which is still with us, you guys are amazing. At least that's my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Golden Girls down below. And very specifically, what you think about them standing the test of time. But for now, I need to ask you to do those other things. Like and share this video to help me spread my word. Subscribe if you haven't already to join the community. And in general, just come be part of our community where we examine stories. Right now I've got 90 subscribers, and when we hit 100, I'm going to give away an Amazon gift card to one of you in a special video. In the meantime, though, let me know what you think about stories in general, or this one particularly, so that we can walk through the heart of the stories we tell. Have a good night.